Hello and welcome back to Dicebreaker. I am Wheels, and today I'm going to be talking about a brand new trading card game that has literally just hit Kickstarter at the time that we've made this video, which has intrigued and fascinated me for multiple reasons to the point where I needed to talk about it and needed to explain it to you all.
This video is sponsored by Veil of the Eternal Night, bringing Castlevania-inspired vampire horror to D&D 5e. Kickstarting from the 30th of January. Check the link in the description below for more.
Talking, of course, about Altered TCG, a game that has kind of come out of nowhere for a lot of people, I think. It's currently sat on pretty big numbers on Kickstarter. Let's get the official number as I'm recording this. But pretty large. It funded in just 2 minutes. It's already at £1.1 million. When it comes to actual backing numbers, obviously that's not going to be a real figure for what they see, because there are funds and all sorts of things that need to be paid off from Kickstarters, as well as just like money that they print on things. But, you know, 28 days ago, 4,000 backers, 1.2 million pledged of their £42,000 goal, obviously generating quite a lot of hype. And I'm here to tell you that I think maybe the hype might be justified. We were lucky enough to go down to Paris just the weekend past, for the Kickstarter launch event for Altered, which is very, very nice of them to invite us down. I will just say, for the sake of being clear, we were invited by Altered. They paid for our flights and our hotel, so take that with a grain of salt. Of course, we were wined and dined to come down, but we were really glad that we did, because up until now we've only seen this game once at Essen in Germany, just as part of a general sort of demo that we had at the show. And ever since that first little game that we played, I think we literally played about once, it's been on the back of my mind. Altered is a really fascinating game for multiple reasons. It's got a really beautiful bit of art. It's got a really interesting theme. It really messes with people's sort of like assumptions about what TCGs do, a lot of which are from Magic the Gathering, of course. But also, this is probably one of the most technologically advanced trading card games I've ever played, for reasons that I'll get into in a bit, but that may well kind of revolutionize how we see buying booster packs and buying singles, and just in the way that we trade cards, and how we get access to things in the future if this becomes the new norm, which it could well be. I don't know. But let's get into things. We're going to kick off. I've got some little notes down here on the side for me. We're going to kick off just to tell you what the hell is Altered, what is this game that's in front of me. So this is a brand new trading card game. It's from the offset, a very standard model. You will get booster packs, you will get starter decks. If you've played Magic or Lorcana or Pokemon, then you'll be familiar with it. But this is set in a sort of original universe that blends our actual Earth with all of these sort of myths and legends and historical figures that kind of make up our cultural canon. There was an event which is called the Confluence, and I didn't have to look at that, I promise, in which these two worlds kind of collided into one. So you've got real people kind of rubbing elbows with fictional characters like the Lady of the Lake and the Mad Hatter and things like that. There are important historical figures like Amelia Earhart sort of knocking around now. And as part of this event, the world was kind of thrown into this sort of tumultuous new, strange, mystical land. And what sets Altered apart from the offset, even just from a thematic point of view, is that this is a game that is not about conflict. So there are multiple factions in this game. They're not a war. They might have disagreements as to how things are supposed to be, managed and the kind of future goals that we as a civilization should look for. But this is not a game about me making monsters and punching you in the face with them. Which, we've just seen Disney Lorcana come out, a game that we would all assume would be quite family friendly. They've been very careful to say that creatures don't die, they're banished and all this kind of thing. But, this is still a game where I can get my Hades to, swing in for massive damage against your Maui or whatever it is. And, they will get hurt. This is not a game in which this is happening. This is a game about exploration. So obviously we're going to have B-roll coming up on the screen to show you what I'm talking about here. But in the center of the two boards, we've got these cards that kind of represent the world that we're exploring post-Confluence, right? So everything is completely changed now. I think there's even thematically a kind of ever-changing nature to this world, so you can never really truly know what it will look like when you first come back, which obviously in the game is kind of indicated by the fact that these cards are going to be shuffled. So as I flip them over, you'll see that they have different landscapes on them and things like that, but they'll be randomized in between each game. So we're playing as heroes, kind of like commanders in Magic the Gathering, and we're using these heroes to explore the world. So again, this isn't a game about me punching you in the face, this is a game about me trying to... We're almost racing to see who can, find a new pathway next and aid our faction to, get a little bit of an upper hand in the kind of new world that we find ourselves in. And it's genuinely quite refreshing. It's a setting that the company behind it describe as sort of like ambitious and positive, and, words that we don't normally associate with like fantasy landscapes. Usually I think of war and treason and all these kind of things, and death and assassins, and if you look at something like Magic the Gathering, it's very kind of like dark and bleak at times, and they have very colourful artwork that suggests like a more sort of wholesome world, but this is something that does strive for a bit more of a less cynical view at what kind of a fantasy world can look like, which I think is really interesting, and that's very much reflected in the artwork. There's absolutely gorgeous art style, super colourful, like vibrant colours. Looking at like the pink faction, the purple faction, just looking at the ways in which the art just pops off the page, I think is going to be really, really interesting for how we kind of like view TCGs in future when it comes to people who are not familiar with the games. Because when I show Magic cards to some of my friends who don't play Magic, especially some of them, they're like, ugh, what is that? That's very ugly and weird looking, right? Some of them are beautiful. A lot of them have like these freaky little guys on. Whereas, yeah, this is like a very, very positive, very vibrant view of the world that we have on the art, and I think that will attract newer players. That it seems to be a goal to try and get a newer audience playing this game, and with that also comes some of the positives that the kind of things that we kind of strive for in Dicebreaker as well. A bit more inclusivity. Sorry, looking for characters from different ethnic backgrounds, different disabilities. There's like, I saw a drag queen character when we were at the show. We've got a double amputee here. Sierra has like full prosthetic legs, and it's kind of a refreshing... It doesn't feel like a world that they've kind of shoved things into in post in the way that some Magic stuff can. Like, it feels very much from the offset. Looks like they're trying to provide a world that is a little bit more diverse than what you would expect from games of its ilk, which is really nice. But yeah, it leaves us in an interesting place to talk about the mechanics, because if this is a game where, we're not fighting, and I'm not trying to get your health total down, or I'm not trying to, win the most points or whatever it is, how does the game actually work? So let's talk about the mechanics. So, like I said, this is a game about exploration. We're using this central track in the middle, and on either side of the track we have the hero and the companion starting places, represented by these little tokens, but you can get like little standees and things like that. So I've got my hero and I've got my companion. And as we play through the game, these guys are going to explore new places and move closer towards each other on the track, with the ultimate goal being, if my companion meets my hero on the same space before yours does, I win the game. And the way that we're doing that is using the symbols that we have on these cards. There are 3 types of biomes. So we have forest, we have mountain, and we have water. And these are all sort of pretty like, they as it stands don't have any kind of thematic differences. They're basically just sort of different values on which you can have on your cards. So every single card, rather than having like attack power or defense, has one of these 3 biomes with a score on. And you could have the same on all 3, you could have slightly different. So for example, this Amelia Earhart card is just 2 across the board. 2 at mountain, 2 at forest, 2 at water. And as you play a character, you're going to choose one of 2 lanes. So you've got 2 expeditions here, one on the left, one on the right. So one's your hero, one's your companion. You choose which side to put it down on, and then you now have that much kind of, power of that colour in that zone. At the end of each round, if you have more power than your opponent in at least one of these colours, and if the sort of position on the board that you're on has one of those colours available. So for example, I can only do mountain and water here. So even if I'm winning forest, for me, it doesn't matter, because regardless of where my opponent is, I'm not in a forest right now, which means that I can't traverse through using that score. But if I've got the most of the mountain, I'll get to progress my little token forward and get ever closer to that win. So instead of it, being like a sort of drawn out process of you've got 20 health and I'm trying to take it down, or I'm trying to get 20 points, or I'm going to try and take down your creatures because they've got more power than I have, or want to, sort of even the playing field. Every single time we play these characters on a turn, they're only there for that turn. So we only care about what their numbers say for that turn, if we progress or not. And then what also sets it apart from other card games is that this is probably one of the only card games I've played where characters, like creatures, as we would call them in Magic the Gathering, aren't just another type of permanent. So these are actually going to leave after every single round. And we have a system called the Reserve. So the Reserve down here is basically a section of your playmat, your board, where it's like a second hand. So these are cards that you did play from your hand, or you might have, taken them off the top of your deck, or however it is that you got them in there. And the cost on the top left of each card actually has two values. The cost at the right in blue, which is how much it costs for you to play this from your hand. And then you've got a lower, usually cheaper cost of how much it costs you to play from the reserve. Because when you play things from the reserve, they effectively get this status effect called fleeting, which is one of these little tokens here. Fleeting just means that if I would go to the reserve, I get discarded instead. So you've kind of got two chances to use each card. And there are ways in which you can sort of mess with that, of course. I can give characters like an anchored ability, which means that they will stick around until next turn. So, kind of build up my board a little bit slower, but it means that I'll have presence there from the get-go on the second turn. There's ways in which you can give or lose fleeting. You can knock things out of people's reserves, and obviously you've got, removal spells and things like that. But it provides this interesting puzzle where you get more use out of your cards than you do when you first play them. And some cards will have effects, like, for example, this Foundry Armorer. This little symbol here meaning that she only has her effect trigger when she comes out of reserve. So playing her from my hand is okay. It's pretty low value for the cost that I put in. But on the next turn, if I can play her from my reserve, all of a sudden, she's getting me an extra bonus, which in this case is like a token somewhere else. So it's got this really interesting kind of... it's very different from any TCG I've played. There's lanes, there's like a brand new mechanic of sort of like trying to get your two people to meet in the middle. You've got cards that don't stick around, but then you've got a second chance for every card you play. And then they're also using a mana system which is similar to things like Lorcana, which is basically at the start of each turn, you're going to draw two cards, and you can choose any card in your hand to go into your mana. Face down, doesn't matter what it is, you just put it straight in, and that's more mana for me to spend on the next turn. Because you're drawing two cards at the start, you're also starting with three cards in your mana well. These games are like quite rapid, they don't kind of slog out at the start like you might expect from other games, because you're pretty much starting with most of the cards in your hand playable. Unless you've got some really big late game plays, you've usually got something that you can put down straight away. And what makes this finally the most interesting, and I think this is probably the mechanic that I love the most from this game, which is going to set it apart from others, is that there isn't a hard turn system in this game. What I mean by that is, we're going to set up at the same time. So we both draw two cards, we both choose whether or not we want to, play a land, or, put something in our inkwell, whatever you want to call it. And then we go into the afternoon phase. They're all sort of named after parts of the day. In the afternoon phase, each player takes it in turn playing one card each. So if I play my character, I then pass priority, essentially. So it's almost like every single card in Magic is going immediately onto the stack, and then you play, then I play, then you play, then I play. You also have your little activated abilities, so you can tap your permanents and things like that to do stuff. Your hero, for example, might have something they can tap for. You've got little permanents, which are like landmarks and artifacts and things like that you can use. So there is a sort of system of, I'm going to do a little bit more on my turn than you will, because I've got these things already set up. But essentially, as soon as you play any card, if I play a character, if I play a permanent, if I play a spell, I'm passing my priority over to the other player. Why that's really interesting is, This is probably one of the first games I've ever played where going first is a disadvantage. Because everything you put down is more information for your opponent. And in the same way that you might hold cards in your hand, even if you could play them, because you want to wait for the opportune moment to do it in other games, you're kind of doing that with every single card you own in Altered. There's always a sense of, if I play this straight away, I'm giving away what my strategy is. If turn 1, I've got my 3 mana, and I pay 3 to put this character down, which means I've got, 2 in every biome on the right-hand side, I've just given away to my opponent that that's all I've got, because I don't have any mana left. So I'm not going to be playing anything else. They can see my board, they can see that I don't have anything to activate. So they can just freely, I've got something here that is actually 3 on each side rather than 2. So I'm just going to completely block all of your ability to traverse, and I'll do it there. Or I'll just go on the other side, because I know that you physically can't put anything there. So I don't have to worry about it. So it's got this really interesting system of trying to play quite conservatively and being like, I'm just going to do my little 1-drop now just to see what you're up to. There's even the sort of like starter deck Purple Commando, which is the Izmir faction. Her ability is just, as long as you're the first player, you can tap her to say, no, you go first. So she effectively never has to go first, which shows you how important, for it to be on a commander, or a hero in this case, shows you how important that is to how the game works. And as you play it more, you'll find yourself being quite cautious of how you lay things down, waiting to play your big bombs until you know that they're going to pop off because you haven't, just sort of given away your big play to the other opponent. So that's really interesting. It's a gameplay system very much unlike anything I've seen from other TCGs on the market. I think that will achieve one of two things. I could do both. I think that it will weird out Magic players. I think Magic players giving this a go will be like, this feels so strange. Probably in the way that Flesh and Blood does at the moment. Like, I played Flesh and Blood for the first time and I was like, this is really odd. Like, I'm not used to this, Because we're so accustomed to games borrowing a lot of their DNA from Magic the Gathering. Like, when you play, if I taught someone Disney Lorcana and then I taught them Magic the Gathering, I imagine a lot of the mechanics, they'd be like, oh, okay, I already know how this works. Yeah, don't worry about it. I know what that does. I know what exhausting is. I know what it means to pay, ink or lands in this case. But yeah, I think that this game is just so different. There's obviously a lot of touchstones. You've still got a mana system. You've still got the cost from hand. You've still got spells and permanents. There's even a sort of like refreshing nature about it that they haven't tried to reinvent every single term in this game. Like, a token is just called a token. If you've played Magic, you know what a token is. A permanent is just a thing that sticks around, so you know what a permanent is. So there's no sort of like, oh, I'm going to call these characters, I don't know, warriors or whatever, just to sound different, just so it sounds like we're doing something different. No, they've actually said, yeah, this is a permanent, this is a token. You are aware of how this is mana. You know what these things are, which I feel like is actually genuinely really refreshing, because it makes it mean that I don't have to learn 8 new terms every time I'm setting up a new game. But I also think that it's going to be quite an interesting new step. If this goes well, if this is a game that does success, I think it's going to be an interesting new step for trading card games in general, sort of stepping out of the shadow of Magic and saying, we're going to make something that doesn't play like your average TCG. We're going to make something that doesn't just feel like I'm playing a new version of Magic the Gathering, which a lot of the time it can. So I feel like they've really achieved something with that. So I'm very interested to see how that goes. The other thing about Altered that sets it apart from every other game, as I sort of teased earlier, is actually nothing to do with the gameplay itself, and more to do with the way in which, the company behind it have monetized the game, and also how it supports players trading cards around and doing organized play. So, as you can probably expect from a trading card game, even if you've never played one in your life, if I have a card here, let's say I've got this little Kellen Burst spell, you have a card I want, you want this card, I can take that card from you, give you this card, and we swap. And that, you just own that now. Things are a little different in Altered, which when I first heard the plan for, when they gave us the initial pitch in Essen, I got really worried about. And then the more I learned about it, the more interested and even excited about it I got. So, you'll notice that every single card that I've been showing off has a little QR code in the bottom right. They're not necessarily the first people to do this. There is a Warhammer Age of Sigmar card game, which I cannot remember the name of, which had a scanning system. So, they had a digital app that you could play. So if you own the card in real life, you could scan it, and now you own it in the app as well, which is really cool. This does a very similar thing in that when you open a booster pack, you've got all your cards that you've gotten. You can scan those QR codes, and you now own those cards digitally. This is not an NFT, which was my main concern when I first saw it. There's no blockchain. This is just on a server. It's very similar to owning, I don't know, a Counter-Strike skin or something like that, right? It's just a digital bit of ownership or a DLC or whatever it is. You own something digitally, like music on iTunes, Is anyone still doing that anymore? I don't know. But as soon as you scan that, it links to your account and now you own this card. So the interesting thing about that is the physical piece of paper that you have in front of you, this piece of cardboard, is effectively worthless now. That's weird, right? I don't care about this card anymore as far as ownership goes. This is not... If this card got ripped in half, it's not the end of the world, right? If I accidentally dropped it off a bridge, it doesn't matter. The reason being, as long as you own a card digitally, you can pay the company like a small fee, essentially, per card to print as many copy of these cards as you want. I could, provided I had the funds and I wanted to do it, I could go on their website once this game is officially launched and say, hey, can you please print me off 20 copies of this? And that's pretty crazy, because I want you to imagine the most rare card that you own if you're a TCG player. Maybe you've got a Black Lotus at home, I don't know. But if you're able to print off 17 Black Lotuses and they come straight from the same factories that are making the original cards, this isn't like off of a printer, this isn't a proxy, this is a card that you can play with and use in a tournament. What does that mean for the value of your card, right? Like, surely these are now worthless? Which is a weird thing for a card game to do, because, are they just gonna completely tank their own value? Well, no, because here's the other interesting thing. Altered has its own digital marketplace, essentially. Once you own that card digitally, you can trade it off to someone digitally. And it means that all of the current sort of like infrastructure that exists for things like Magic, where I can sell my card to you on the internet and like ship it, essentially physically ship it to you, it's just taking away the shipping aspect, right? So if there's a card that I really want, I can buy the single straight from the marketplace off of another player. Like, money is just going to another player. I'm sure that there's some kind of like transaction fee that Altered will get, because they have to make money somehow, right? But I can open a booster, sell off every single card in there, and just keep the physical ones. Because if I'm playing casually, I don't care if I own these digitally or not. I just have them in my hands. And I could print off 8 copies of the card that I've got and then sell it online because I don't need it anymore. The only reason that you would want to own something digitally outside of the rights to print it for yourself is if you wanted to do organized play. So if you're entering into an official tournament, you effectively have to prove that you have those cards online. When you submit that deck list, you're doing it through their app and showing that you actually physically digitally own those cards. Physically digitally. That was weird. Oh god, you can see why it's confusing. You digitally own those cards, and therefore it's fine for you to physically own them. Does that make sense? It's very strange. It's a very new concept. Whether or not this will be a commercial success, I don't know. Whether or not they'll be ruining the fact that they did this, who knows? But I actually think for the casual consumer, for the people who just go to a Magic club locally to play Commander and they don't care about organized competitive play, I think it's a massive win, right? How many times have you got, let's say in Lorcana, for example, I've got a card that I really like, but it's super rare, and now I want to build a deck around it, but I obviously want 4 of them in my deck. Do I go out and buy another 3 copies each for $20 each, or whatever it is? Or do I just, in this new system, print them all? Print as many as I need. I can put them in multiple decks now if I'm just playing with friends, and then sell off that digital copy to someone who needs it more. Sure. If my mate has a copy of a card that I really like, he can print it off for me and give it to me. Fantastic. So I feel like if you're a casual player, it's going to be a lot easier for you to construct your ideal deck. There are obviously limitations on deck building, like you can only have 3 of each card in your deck. There's a limit to how many rares you have, and things like that. But as far as you're concerned, like if you're just playing with friends, you can get almost all the cards you need very easily. As long as you've owned one copy of that card, you've probably got, you know, the remit to build a deck with it for as long as you want. You can keep that digital ownership and just keep printing it forever if you really want to, or you can just sell it on if you're not bothered about owning it digitally. The other interesting thing, and this is what kind of incentivizes, especially for, you know, tournament goers, to want to own these cards, is that the cards that you see, so this Foundry Armorer, for example, exist in multiple states. So this is a common card you can see because it has a black border. Whenever you get a rare card, I don't know if I have one out in front of me, but rare cards essentially are borderless, and they have some kind of upgraded effect. So this Three Little Pigs card here, for example, because it contains no border, it means it's rare, and it has some kind of added bonus. So, for example, I believe it has, usually you get 1 boost when you play it, this one gets 2 instead. It's the exact same card. It just has a little stat boost. There's a limit to how many of these you can have in a deck, so you can't just have an entire deck of rares, otherwise they'd be, you know, you just want the rares. But you effectively, all of the rarest cards in the game are just slightly improved versions of cards that are common level. So it's another way that means that this is very accessible. If there's like a card that you really want to build around in Magic the Gathering that's a mythic rare, it's very difficult for you to get access to that card because it's mythic rare. There's only a chance that there'll be maybe 1 or, if you're lucky, 2 in a pack, and therefore it's just more difficult to get your hands on them because they're just rarer. Even if they're not worth a lot of money, they're still just difficult to find. With this, if I really like the Three Little Pigs card and I want to build a deck around it, it's nice to have the rare version because it's a better version, so I can sort of upgrade it if that's what I'm after, but the common version is still accessible to me. You know, if I want to play like a pauper level game with people and just use commons, I have access to every single card that's ever been printed, you know? Pauper in this sort of gameplay mode just means that we can't upgrade our cards, that's it. What's even weirder is there's a 3rd level of upgrade that each card has, which is basically a unique version. This is going to be really similar in sort of concept, but not in application, to things like Keyforge, where they're using effectively algorithms to generate new versions of cards. Again, this isn't AI, this is just an algorithm, right? This is a sort of large spreadsheet somewhere that has costed bonuses that can be added to a thing. But because there's, you know, millions of different ways in which those could be made, you can grab a Three Little Pigs that now has, I don't know, Anchored or something like that, a new ability that's added on top that makes it essentially super rare. And I believe you can only have about 3 of those unique cards in a deck. So again, it's not just about, I'm just going to get all the most rare cards and shove them in the deck. There are restrictions to how many of those you can use, but it's just the same card that has a further bonus. The interesting thing about those unique cards, and the reason they're called uniques, is because only one of those will ever exist. So they'll never do a reprint of the exact same card with the exact same rule text, which is a unique. So if this Three Little Pig has Anchored, nobody else on Earth will be able to grab this. Except, again, that's not true, right? Because I can print as many of these as I want. If this is a really cool card and I want loads of it and I just want to give it to my friends or whatever, it cost me like $1 or something to print off a new copy and just like give it to someone or just have multiple copies so that I can play it in multiple decks. If I'm going to a tournament and I've got like 4 decks that I want to play with, but I'm not sure which one, and I'm umming and ahhing over which card to put this amazing unique that I've got in there, which is super powerful, I don't have to. I can just print off multiple copies and put them in either. You know, I can put them in every single deck that I have if I really want, if it's that good. And there's no restriction to that as long as I'm not playing both decks at the same time, which I doubt I will be, because I don't know how a human does that in a tournament. But it's something that you need to wrap your head around. It's a very strange concept. And I worry for the company that it could end up not making any money if people just don't value digital ownership enough. But I think if we're taking some of the cost out of playing TCGs, out of, you know, the average Joe's hands. You know, if someone's just playing Commander, why do they have to pay 50 quid to get a counter spell or whatever that's really good? You know, why do they have to pay £60 for a Smothering Tithe because it's a good white ramp card? What if everyone had access to that? You know, they might not have access to the best version of it, but they could. You know, they might not have access to the like card forever because it will get ripped up eventually and all things are impermanent. But what if that wasn't the end of the world and we didn't have to all obsessively triple sleeve our cards because we're so worried about a piece of cardboard losing value because we can just print it off again? Do you know what I mean? It feels good. It feels like a step in a new direction, in a direction that I like. Question is, will it do well? What do you think? Let me know in the comments. Is this a game that is going to see, you know, a lot of play? Is it going to be a sort of flesh and blood that has a small but dedicated audience? Could this be one of the new big players? Feels like we're in a brand new sort of golden age of trading card games right now. I don't know. But I'm excited about it. And I like it. And let me tell you, it plays really well. The gameplay is really, really fun. We did a little tournament. You know, we all sort of chose a faction. There's 6 factions in the game. They all have their own playstyle. Axiom are all about sort of artifacts and making little robots. You've got the Bravos, who are kind of about playing big, scary creatures, and they've got the best sort of ramp in the game. You've got the Go Wide, the Ordis, who are effectively like the bureaucrats, making loads of little 1/1s, just flooding the board. You've got the Easmere, which I talked about earlier, where they can literally just, this commander can just say, no, you take the first turn. They're all about being sort of tricksy and using lots of spells and things like that. You've got the pink faction, the Lyra, who are really fun. They're like the chaotic faction, a lot of dice rolling, a lot of like random chance. And then you've got the Muna, who are sort of like your tree huggers, who are really good at like having stuff stick around and giving them boosts and things like that. But, you know, they're very peace-loving, so they don't really have any effective removal, which is kind of fun. I think the art is fantastic. They've teamed up with GameGenic for all of their accessory supplies. So the playmat and the sleeves that you're looking at is made by GameGenic. I've been quite vocal about the fact that I think GameGenic make really, really, really lovely accessories. They're some of my favorites in the world. Disclaimer, they send us stuff for free. So, you know, again, not necessarily completely unbiased, but I'm a big fan of GameGenic. It's just, they seem really well set up. They've had a great Kickstarter. It could be a really big deal. So let us know what you think in the comments. The Kickstarter is running right now as this video goes out. It's already doing well, but obviously you probably get cards for cheaper, things like that. You can right away, as we speak, print and play. All of these cards are available from the starter deck to just print and play. You can print them off at home and play. You can print them on a piece of paper and just shove them in a sleeve, and obviously they're fine. You can just play like that forever if you really wanted to. It seems to be the vibe that they don't really mind. It's also available on Board Game Arena if you want to play digitally. I'm sure it's on things like Tabletop Sim as well. So yeah, give it a go. Tell me what you think. Let us know in the comments below if this is something that you're excited to play more of. Are we having too many TCGs at the moment? Is there such a thing as too many TCGs? Is all competition good? Let us know in the comments. I'm Will from Dicebreaker. Please do give us a subscribe, give us a like, click the bell icon to get notified whenever we put a video live. You can find us on dicebreaker.com as well, where we are posting all sorts of news articles, including news about Altered TCG, so you can read up more on it over there. I'll have a link in the description to all of those below. Big thank you to Altered again for flying us out to see the Kickstarter launch party. We had a great time. Lovely to go to Paris for the first time as well, which is pretty cool. And most importantly, thanks very much for watching. I hope you enjoy what you play of this if you do, and have a lovely day. Goodbye.